Tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang Dhammang Sanghang Namasami. So I'd like to welcome everyone this evening. So last night we had another one of class of our classes in the Introduction to Meditation course, and the topic we did last night was mettā, or loving kindness meditation. So again, this is a really great practice to do, developing loving kindness, developing this meditation. Not only is it really helpful for making the mind calm, making the mind peaceful. Like the Buddha said, a mind with loving kindness becomes concentrated very easily. But this practice of loving kindness, of metta, is really transformative. It can really change us inside. It can really work against our anger, really work to change those negative qualities inside, that aversion. So when people teach about metta, teach about loving kindness, a lot of times there's a few of these suttas, a few of these text teachings of the Buddha, these discourses of the Buddha that people always go back to again and again, and kind of become some of the really famous, really popular ones with talking about metta. So probably the most famous one is the Karaniya Metta Sutta. And a lot of people just call it the Metta Sutta because it's so well known and and used so often for teaching metta. And it's even in our morning and evening chanting. We chant the sutta in both Pali and in English. And so it's a really well-known one. But there's another one which is also really well known and really used a lot when we're talking about developing loving kindness. And it's this one called the simile of the saw. So I talk about this sutta every now and then. I really like it. It has different parts of it, but the actual part where the Buddha is teaching the simile of the saw, the Buddha is telling you that if, say, two strong men were to hold you down and cut you limb from limb with a two-handed saw. So those are like, those big ones you'd see like when they do like the old-timey cutting of wood. Nowadays it would be a chainsaw. That would be the modern equivalent. But so, basically the Buddha is saying if these two guys were to grab you, hold you down and cut you limb from limb with a big saw, he said, even then you shouldn't have hatred towards them in your heart. You shouldn't have a mind of aversion, of anger towards them. You should have a heart of loving kindness towards them. And this is a really great teaching because a lot of times, we think that there are certain, or especially in like modern culture, there's this belief that there's these certain times when there is like justified anger. Someone has done something wrong, and we're justified to be angry at that. When I was a layman, I had a friend, and he was very quite the political activist, and he wanted to get tattooed across his chest righteous indignation because it was so much a part of his life and his identity and his being. And so there's this idea that if someone's done something bad enough, or if someone's done something bad enough to us, it's okay for us to be angry at them. And the Buddha here is saying, no, it's not, because he's even saying, if you're cut limb from limb, which would be a very painful thing and just like the most awful thing which could happen to you, even then you shouldn't, because there's so many drawbacks to, that anger. You know, when we have that anger comes up in our mind and we really indulge in it and we really go for it, the first person that's being harmed by it and the person who gets harmed the most by it is going to be us. Just the effect that's going to have on our mind. And and so we really don't want to. But when the Buddha was trying to explain reasons not to be angry, he gave this one sutta, and it's one I really like. It's called the Kodhana Sutta, and it's these things which when we get angry and like lose our temper, get angry and stuff, that makes our enemies happy. So this is the Buddha's like, he's trying to like convince you and talk you out of getting angry because he's saying, actually, when you're angry and you lose your temper and or you holding a grudge or something like that, you can be making your enemies happy. That person you're angry at, that person who's done something to you, you're actually going to be making them happy. So it's a list of seven. And the first one, the Buddha said that, when you get angry at someone, your enemy is going to be happy because it's going to make you ugly. And so it's like right away, the Buddha's trying to appeal to our vanity and our not wanting to be ugly. And but you can see it when there's someone who, is angry and they're in a really foul mood, no matter how good looking they are, or how much they beautify the body. So the Buddha was even saying, even if they put on perfumes and makeup and stuff, when they're angry, they get ugly. And we've all seen this firsthand. And so, when we do that, when we lose our temper, we're holding our grudge, we're going to look like that. We're going to have that sour look on our face, and that'll make our enemies happy. Another one is the Buddha said, so for the second one, the Buddha said um, that when we get angry like that, we sleep badly. And and you see this a lot. A lot of people have experienced this themselves or know people who go through this. When you've got anger in the mind and you're just thinking it over and it's just spinning over and over in your head and you're getting more angry and you just can't let this go. um y- People can't sleep because that anger, it has a bit of like an energy to it. It's one of the ones why, a lot of times we talk about anger, it's like fire, it's burning. And we quite often um compare the two because it has that quality, it has that energy, it has that heat to it. So when that's going over in your mind, a lot of times you can't get to sleep. Like I've met people before, and when they get really angry at someone, they literally won't sleep at night. And they'll just be thinking it over. So then the next day, not only are they still angry and probably more angry because they've been thinking about it all night, but they also haven't slept as well too. So it's more likely that they're going to do or say something which they'll end up regretting. And again, so when that happens, our enemies, they're happy about that. And another one, the third one is the Buddha says that you won't profit. So you're going to get this confusion between gain and loss. And so you can see that sometimes, like when someone is getting really angry, they're losing their temper and they're just really like they've lost it. And they'll do something and say, for example, they'll uh, tell off a friend, destroy a friendship over something that someone has said to them, and they feel like it's a victory. They feel like, oh, I've done something good, I've done something great. And you're thinking, oh, buddy, you're going to regret that later on. Or their boss has done something to them and they get really angry. They go into their boss's office and they tell him off, or they quit on the spot and storm out, and they feel like this great victory. And you're just thinking, oh, buddy, you've really hurt yourself. What you're really going to regret what you did. And so again, that'll make our enemies happy when we do that. And the fourth one, the Buddha said, was there's going to be a loss of wealth. So the Buddha said that, the way it's described in the sutta, like the wealth you get, it's going to be taken by the king, given to the treasury. So this is when we do something, when we get that anger, a lot of times we're going to do something which is going to have some kind of legal consequence to it. And so this was the Buddha was talking about. So nowadays, not only would it could be fines, it could be depending what you do. You get angry, you lose your temper, you hit someone, you could get fined, you could get a criminal record from it, you can end up going to jail, losing your freedom. And when that happens, there's all types of consequences and ramifications that come to us. So again, that losing your temper, losing out to that anger, it can have these really huge legal consequences for us. And a lot of times, when that anger has arisen in our minds and it almost like intoxicates our mind. And when you get in that really angry mood, you're just not seeing things straight. You're not thinking about things calmly, and you end up doing stuff that you're going to end up regretting. And so I remember Thich Nhat Hanh, this kind of famous uh, Vietnamese Zen teacher. He lived in France, but he taught all over the world. And he used to have this thing he'd say when you're really angry, don't say or do anything because it's going to be wrong. But of course, in some situations, you can't avoid that, But so really, that's where you have to have that really strong base in your sila, and in your right speech and your right actions, and knowing even, when I'm this angry, I know those limits, I know those lines not to cross, I know what to say, and but if you're in that situation where you really feel like you're going to, um, and you can't control it, you can't get rid of that anger, just walk away, and it's better to walk away than to go to jail. So, or to have some kind of long-term ramifications, long-term loss based on that. And the fifth one is that we're going to suffer loss of reputation. So again, a lot of times, you'd think coming to Buddhism, coming to practice Dhamma, we shouldn't be worried about what other people think about us. What's important is our practice. We're not, we're always saying, we're not chasing fame and gain and praise. Those are just worldly wins. But when we are living in and of course on like ultimate reality and in the level of Dhamma, that's true. But we also do live in a conventional world. We do live in a world where we have to interact with other people. We have to live with other people. We have to, as lay people, you have to work jobs or you have to do all these interactions. And so if you're someone so your reputation does, have a bit of uh, importance. You don't want to be known as that person who's always losing his temper. So what can happen is when you do like get like that, you're an angry person, you're losing your temper all the time, everyone knows about it. The word spreads, and then people don't want to interact with you anymore. They don't want to speak to you. They don't want to be your friends. And so, you can get this really bad reputation spread about you, and it can really end up biting you in the future. And so the sixth one, the Buddha said, is you lose friends. And so you really do see this when, there's it can happen in like different ways. So for example, you can lose friends by, you're just always like losing your temper at your friends. You're angry, you're telling them off, you're losing your temper at them, and you end up ruining all your friendships because, you can't control that anger. You haven't been able to get rid of that anger. You haven't worked on it enough. But it can also be even if you're not getting angry at your friends, they're not the ones. But if you're very angry at someone else, say you have a grudge against someone, and what can happen is you talk about it a lot. You're always complaining. This person did this and that. He did this to me, and it is the point where like people don't want to hear that. People don't want to be around that. So I saw this really strong firsthand. And many years ago, I was living in a hermitage, and there was this worker who the hermitage was in the back of a tamarind orchard, and the tamarind orchard was actually connected to a lime orchard as well too. The person owned both, and there's this layman who worked at the orchard, and he would take care of monks when they were staying at this hermitage, and he really liked doing it, and he would come with us on our morning alms round, and we didn't really need him. We had enough food, but he really liked doing it. And it could be a bit of a drain too, because a lot of times you'd have to go wake him up for the alms round. And but he was a really nice guy. But he was from Cambodia, and he had had a really, really tough life. He was a child through the Khmer Rouge stuff, and he had a lot of trauma, and he had this really tough life. And all he did was complain. So when you go on your alms round, he would just complain the whole way there and the whole way back. And it was the same. He didn't want any advice. He didn't want to learn how to deal with his problems. and he complained about literally the same things every day. And so it was nothing new, nothing new had happened. And so for me, I actually it was this great teaching. I was really uh thankful that this had happened because it really showed me firsthand. It's like, oh, that's what it feels like when you complain about people all the time, you know? It's like, well, if I do that, I'm going to make people feel the same way. And I learned so much from this layman, like, and just by the way he behaved. And it's really like that, you know. So if you're angry at someone, you have a grudge against them, you're always complaining about them, you're going to lose friends. And again, that's going to make your enemies happy. And then the seventh one was you're going to get a bad rebirth because your mind is always full of anger. You've got these negative mind states. You're feeding them, you're making them grow, and it's going to lead to a negative birth. So this was just this list. And again, I find it a kind of a fun list of the Buddha basically trying to show the drawbacks of having that anger in our minds, and the really try to teach us that when this anger arises in our minds, we need to take care of it. We need to get rid of it because um, there's no there's no circumstances where it's going to benefit us. It's always going to have some drawback to us be having anger. And that being said, um, uh, to get rid of the anger, we have to really put into effort to do this. It's not something there's, a magic formula to get rid of, and it's something which is going to take time. So one of the things, we can do is this practice of developing loving kindness, but we don't want to do it just while we're sitting meditation, because we want to do it, be able to bring this loving kindness into our lives. So one of the ways we can do that is by body and speech, doing acts of loving kindness, using words of loving kindness, when we speak to people. And this, again, this is going to be really start working on conditioning our mind. So a lot of times you really see, especially with the monks training, with all these rules we have as monks, these rules are all to help us. And one of the things they do is they help train our mind. So a lot of times we do this, it's kind of like this outside working inside. So, we keep, sila, like our morality, and that has an effect on us in our mind. And so watching what we're saying, and if we really, actively working on using speech of loving kindness, not just to the person's face, but behind their back as well, too. And, actions of loving kindness, and then really bringing up loving kindness into our minds. We can bring up these reflections, may they be happy, may they be peaceful, may they be well. And even if throughout our day we can use this as just an object to keep our mindfulness. So the traditional way in the Thai forest tradition is, say, the mental recitation of Buddha as a way to keep mindfulness. But you could also, if you want, you could use loving kindness as a way to keep your mindfulness. Keep those verses going in your mind. May I be happy. May I be peaceful. May I be free from suffering. And then when you encounter people, may he be happy. May he be peaceful. May he be free from suffering. And and we can do this towards people in our days. There's this one very senior monk, very respected monk in Thailand, and he actually has this practice of, at the end of the day, he'll go through in his mind everyone he encountered during the day and spread loving kindness to them, just to make sure he doesn't have any lingering negativity towards them. Really kind of like washing the slate clean after his day. So we can find these different little skillful means for us to try to prevent the arising of anger, of aversion. And then once it's arisen, we can work on uh, taking care of it, getting rid of it as quick as we can. So again, we don't want to, when that anger, that aversion arises in our mind, we don't want to uh, fault find with ourselves. We don't want to come down hard on ourselves because it's very easy for this to happen. We're practicing, and we feel things are going great, and then we lose it. We someone says something and it just happens to be that thing we're really sensitive about. and we lose it, and we get angry. And so a lot of times what can happen is we can come down hard on ourselves and be like, oh, I did it again. I've been trying so hard. I thought things were going so well, and I did it again. I lost it again. But it's important for us not to do that, because that's just more aversion. It's just more aversion, and it's just going to create more aversion. Aversion isn't overcome by aversion. Aversion is overcome by the opposite, by non-aversion, by loving kindness. And so when it does come up, we don't get hard on ourselves, don't judge ourselves. We just work on it. It actually reminds me of there's this very famous monk in Thailand named Lumpur Jamnian, and he actually comes and teaches in the West quite a bit. And when you see him, you remember him. He has this very unique kind of eccentric look because he carries a lot of stuff. He used to carry 60 kilos of stuff, which I think is like 130 pounds or something, over 100 pounds of stuff he used to carry under his robe. So he looked huge. He's not actually that big, but it's just all this stuff he was carrying. But he's quite old now. So when I met him a number of years ago, he was down to about 40 kilos, which is, I think, about 100 pounds of stuff. And so it's all kinds of like amulets and this and that. And this is part of one of his special practices he does. But I remember in one of his talks, he was saying that he had these three principles of practice that he had when he was practicing, when he was junior. And one of them was to accept everything as it is. So this is like not just when something comes up, you just accept, okay, it's like this. Like Lumpur Smedo always says, this is the way it is, or it's like this. So not judging it, not being hard on yourselves, not trying to kind of deny reality. So whenever, you start thinking like should or shouldn't, people should be like this. It shouldn't be like that. You're going to suffer because that's just craving. That's just tanha. So that's the cause of suffering. So he said, you accept everything as it is. And then he said, um, whatever mind state comes up, greed, anger, delusion, all of their manifestations, he said he would try to see them in terms of the three characteristics. So see them as impermanent, see them as not unsatisfactory or suffering, and see them as not self. So basically, he's approaching them with wisdom, seeing these things with wisdom. And then the third thing he said was he tried to get rid of these mind states as quick as possible. And so, of course, someone like him who's like a really, really impressive monk and really great meditator and stuff and incredible practice, it's going to be a lot quicker for him than it's going to be for most of us to get rid of them. But the idea is trying not to hold on to them, not to have these mind states go on a long time, because the longer, you know, you're angry at something, kind of the more angry you get. It spins around, and just keeps like the grooves driving in snow. It gets deeper and deeper. So we want to try to get those out, as quick as possible, as quick as we can. And so yeah, when developing loving kindness, this can be a great practice for us. And for us to really recognize that, when these states of anger, greed, delusion come up into our mind, there's never a time it's a good thing. So when we're angry, it's never a good thing. And the Buddha tried to tell us that even when we may feel it's justified, it's never justified. And long term, we're just going to make our enemies happy when we get angry. So I'd like to offer that to everyone as a bit of a reflection for this evening.